Hey everybody, it's Roger with Kinsta. I'm joined today by a new friend, Mike. Hey Mike, how are you?
Not too bad. How you doing, Roger?
I'm doing really well. I'm excited to have this conversation and learn more about you and the Marketeering Group, which is the agency that you're the general manager of, or where would you put yourself?
I'm the managing director, so
Managing
I help sales
director.
operate.
Fantastic, fantastic. I want to, before we like dive into all the marketing and fun stuff there, I'd really love to learn more about how you got into computers and how you got into the web.
Right. Yeah. Well, I was actually a music major for college and finished that up, and not a lot of opportunities after that. So my first foray online was actually doing grant writing and then doing writing for video games. So I was one of the early guys that was out there writing on the web for about 2 cents a word. It was back when
Okay.
about.com and eHow were really popular. And I
Sure.
remember I saw a post on a board, and I had minored in English. I saw a post like, make money online, and it was very new at the time. And so I was like, well, I need some extra cash to pay the bills between playing churches on Christmas and Easter. So I decided to give it a shot. And they would
Okay.
accept anybody back then. And it was a lot of drinking from a fire hose, a lot of writing for really, like gambling and gold and whatever was popular back then on the web. This was back in like 2006.
Sure.
So, yeah, got into it through that. And I started getting interested in, since we were paid by the word, there were some projects that would, if you did HTML code in your actual content, they would pay you for that as well. So I was like, oh, well,
Okay.
that's great. I can make an extra couple bucks per article. So I started learning HTML. And then, of course, there were other projects where they would pay you based on how much traffic your content got. Through that, I started getting really interested in how you optimize content for SEO to get more traffic there. So it was just little by little gaining small skills, just to kind of make a little bit more money, and ultimately had a pretty good set of knowledge that I was able to get into some of my first roles that were more SEO focused and small agencies, things like that. So that was kind of the start.
Okay.
And then since then, I've had a couple in-house roles, but I've really spent most of my career in agencies.
Okay. All right. So backing up a little bit, when you were first like writing for these sites, were you actually publishing into the site or you were just sending them like an email, or this was probably before Google Docs?
Oh yeah, yeah. This was a plain text, like like a little text editor on your computer, and yeah, you would send over 100 attachments on an email.
Okay.
So I didn't touch a website for years when I
Okay.
started writing, and most of the time I didn't know where the content was going at the start. And it's about meeting people, and when you do that much contract work, eventually somebody hopefully scoops you up and gives you a little more consistent of a gig, because real feast or famine. I remember if it hadn't been for this company, Demand Studios, that would pay you like $15 an article, I don't know how I was going to pay my rent, because
Okay.
this is very small stuff. But yeah, I've been in love with WordPress since the very beginning, though, because that was my first time where somebody was like, okay, you can actually upload directly to the website. And of course, after a flurry of Google searches and how to do it and all that stuff, kind of figured it out.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that didn't happen until probably like 2009 or so.
Okay. All right. So a little bit of time between that, but you
Mhm.
really got your chops basically doing copywriting and SEO optimization.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I
All
was
right.
obsessed. I had a mentor early that told me, if you want to do well, go find small failing agencies and work there. Don't work
Okay.
at really large successful agencies, because if you're young and new, you're going to learn the most trying to solve problems at those kind of agencies. And he was right.
Yeah.
I've working at those agencies actually did become a WordPress developer, and for a few years I ran a WordPress developer team
Okay.
there, just after so much time spent adding content to websites. You pick up little things here and there, and then you kind of fake it till you make it. So
Yeah, sure. Well, and then there's also that, if you're at an agency that's struggling and you can fill those gaps, and the whole linchpin, right? Seth Godin and his whole linchpin kind of philosophy
Yeah,
there.
absolutely.
So that's fantastic. Um, so I mean, you've been at marketeering now for 14 years.
Hmm. Yeah, a long run.
Okay. And so you've seen quite a few different shifts in there. What do you think is like one human element that, and having come through all this content creation, what do you think's most at risk with the rise of AI and automation today?
There's a lot of risks. We're having to have a lot more conversations with you. You've got the extreme end of clients that are maybe on a spectrum of very excited and very uninformed about it,
Okay.
and have
Okay.
expectations that put a lot of pressure on you that you might not be able to meet those demands. I'm sort of surprised in a lot of ways the amount of pressure that's been put on SEO teams to optimize for AI, because it's an entirely different channel. And we're having a lot of conversation with clients about, is optimizing for something like AI, is that a reputation problem? Is it a brand or PR problem? Or is it an SEO problem? I think Eli Schwartz had a good article. He's the product-led SEO guy recently on exactly that. Like, why are SEO teams the ones owning all this when it's sort of just a multi-team effort to get there?
Yeah.
So there's obviously that with your work with clients, and we haven't seen an impact necessarily on the clients that we work with. We're very heavily on the B2B side for doing SEO, and maybe we've been a little bit lucky, but I haven't seen a lot of losses in SEO traffic. But there's this perceived pressure that clients feel that they don't know what are our competitors doing. They must be getting leads from LLMs, and having to figure out, is it really an opportunity for us? Is that really where we're interacting with potential customers? All of those conversations, I could have done without those conversations in 2025, 2026. So there's that side, right? Working with clients. The other side is obviously running a team and handling the angst that you get from the team, that anytime you try to implement AI into processes, there's this legitimate fear that, well, am I just working myself out of a job? Which that's not how I think about it. But or you're dealing with people who are maybe using AI more as a crutch than a tool, and
Mm.
having to really train them and nurture appropriate usage of the technology.
Yeah, no. So you brought up a couple of different points there. So I've seen a lot of people referring to it as digital PR
Hmm.
in how to approach it. And I think that that's maybe a good way to pitch clients is like, it's not SEO, it's not PR, but it's this new digital PR kind of space where we're having to do like all the things. And now it's just getting wrapped up into one kind of chatbot output. And then on the other end, you're talking about, the problem with AI slop, right? Just a lot of people are just putting out whatever the chatbot gives them, and now you have to spend even more time trying to fix that. I can definitely see the challenges around that. Kind of talking a little bit more about like the marketeering philosophy. I see that you guys kind of define it as a blend of content, human behavior, and analytical management. How do you keep those three in balance when the client is looking just for like a spreadsheet of leads or something?
Well, that's a good question. There's two different modes of thought with how you approach SEO. Sort of the old school, where we're not necessarily responsible for your sales, we're responsible for your visibility and search. One thing about working at an agency is you don't tend to work with people that have a unified vision of how it's supposed to be. And some people have that, very large teams. It's impossible if you're working with a very large company to hold your single agency vendor responsible for your spreadsheet of leads, right? So it really depends on how we're engaging with the team and what's really important to them. We have just as many clients where it's not necessarily generating those leads, but it's supporting other teams and making sure that they're getting the visibility that they hope to get.
Okay. All right. Makes a lot of sense. Um, As we're talking about like scaling the business, I imagine over 14 years, there's been a lot of different growth spurts and you've seen a lot of different things that happening. How do you build a repeatable process for SMBs without making them feel like they're just another ticket in your system?
Well, you have to be very flexible in your process and very flexible in your relationship with your clients. Having done SEO for so long, when I started, I mean, you were literally counting how many times you put the keyword on the page, and buying links on the sidebars of websites, and starting there and getting to where we've come today. There's been so many challenges over the course of that journey that this movement towards AI it doesn't feel that profound. It feels like just another change that we have to adapt to. And I remember I was much more panicked after like the Panda update a long time ago, or Hummingbird or Penguin, that had a really big impact on our processes. And one thing that I've really been trying to instill in people is that especially when it comes to AI and SEO, you have to evaluate your processes and whether your current processes depend on humans, and are they built to actually be automated? Because I think where a lot of companies are going wrong in approaching AI with their agencies and kind of at least trying to have a scalable approach to their work is they're trying to automate processes that have silos with humans, or that are really set up for human support, where you really need to rethink your processes and potentially redesign them.
Okay.
So for us, it's a mix of having scalable, work that we can duplicate again and again, with that layer of extreme flexibility and testing, as far as making sure that we've no idea what we're doing. Is the attitude. I wouldn't put that in our marketing materials, but you have to go with that approach that no websites act the same. When you're doing SEO, you can't usually get the same results that you got at this other project with the same level of effort. So you just have to be constantly testing new things and responding to those changes, and free to fail kind of attitude.
Sure. No, I love it. You took me back there. I hadn't heard Panda, Hummingbird, or Penguin in
Yeah, I'm
a
still
long
talking.
time in regards to SEO. Oh man. Man.
Well,
That's some
yeah,
PTSD stuff right there.
definitely still keeps me up at night sometimes.
Excellent, excellent. As far as like technical debt goes, and we've hit a little bit on this with like AI tools and whatnot, but a lot of times I see agency owners get really bogged down with like the plumbing of stuff. So hosting, security, maintenance. At what point in your journey did you decide that doing it yourself was kind of the enemy of growth?
I learned really early in my career the value of having certain things in the organization, like an in-house development department has been absolutely critical to us, so we don't have to like outsource that. But do you mean like do it yourself as far as encouraging clients to not do it themselves with AI, or do you mean
Well,
what do you mean?
possibly, but more like with the hosting, right? So you guys, you use Kinsta for at least some of your client websites.
Yes.
I've seen, having been in hosting for over 20 years, right? I've seen a really big evolution just here. And something that I commonly hear from agencies is, I really wish we had figured out this hosting thing a lot sooner than we did. How's that experience been for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it was probably about midway at this agency that we realized that something was very wrong with how we were
Okay.
handling hosting.
Okay.
The idea of dealing with, and at the time we were doing this, dealing with multiple different customer support teams on the hosting side of very different motivations and attitudes. I won't name any names, but
No need.
we
Yeah.
had all these different hosts, and it was a nightmare. And things were constantly going wrong. Downtime, and clients, they don't generally care who's responsible for something. If you're working on their website, you're probably going to be responsible for whether it's up or down at a very base level. And so we were so glad when we started to work with just a single dedicated host. In this case, we work with a couple dedicated hosts, but it was a game changer. Yeah, pretty much overnight.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
really a push from our development team,
Okay.
because they would spend hours on the phone with
Okay.
customer support, just such a loss. But with Kinsta and companies like that, customer support is really strong. So we're able to get things accomplished and pass the buck over to the host as well. We should be able to, because that's not really our gig.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. As I've seen things evolve, it's funny when I had an agency years ago, I always just like think back of like, man, if I had had a Kinsta or something managed back then, or just realized, hey, I just need to spend a little bit more and I can like not worry about that stuff anymore.
Yeah.
Would have just been a really big change.
Yeah.
Kind of talking about, your agency leadership and the culture, you've kind of mentioned it a little bit in here. As you're working with a diverse team of, you mentioned developers, you've probably got strategists and like yourself, a creative in there. How do you foster the creation between the logical dev side and the creative content side?
Well, I let dev lead. Another big challenge we've had in the past that we kind of worked our way out of was working with designers. And often you would look at maybe a design mock-up and it doesn't translate into a WordPress theme without an extreme level of customization. And we've learned over the years that the more customization you apply to a theme, the obvious more problems you're going to have during updates. And so when we've worked with designers and of course for in-house, they're designing based off of a WordPress theme, and we're using it in the sales process to say we're going to keep the cost down on this website by sticking to this sort of design concept as closely as we can. And generally they're happy with the product. But you set that expectation very early, and you make sure you don't open any doors to saying the dreaded situation sometimes is maybe a client wants to use their own designer and trying to fit them into our process. It can definitely be challenging and set some weird expectations.
Okay. So having those conversations early is really the key for you.
Yeah. And all our developers are client facing, which is something when we go out and look for developers is something really important to us so that they can we use project managers, but the developers usually only want it on a website at a time so they can fully own that project. That helps a lot. That ownership and accountability
Interesting.
Can really drive.
Yeah, that's kind of a unique scenario there. I haven't run across a lot of agencies that have customer facing developers really much. Usually, the developer doesn't want to be customer facing. How do you find developers that are okay with actually talking to people?
Well, I give them a pretty good deal, right? They have a good working environment, a lot of trust, a lot of motivation on that front. Most of the people who come here to do development, I think they come because they want that level of ownership. Our in-house team is almost exclusively working on new website builds, because my understanding, just talking to developers, is that's the kind of work that they want to do. Whereas, for maintenance, we would outsource a lot of maintenance to other really qualified agencies. So that keeps that work off of them and gets them involved in projects where they can really show their creativity. And in exchange, they end up being client facing. So we have a whole series of tests and things that we'll put people through during the hiring process just to make sure they're comfortable with that. And we're really transparent that that's part of the expectation. So.
Okay. All right. Very curious. I'm curious to know, like, could you share like maybe one of the questions or tests that you kind of throw at them that maybe is a little different?
Well, we'll do a mock presentation where we'll prepare them ahead of time, and they're going to talk through a scope of work that we'll provide for them. And they can make adjustments to that if they like, but we'll basically, one of the interview rounds is basically that. They're literally presenting a project in one phase or another, whether it's going over a really simple sitemap and bringing it to life, which is one of my favorite ones, because if you have a website that only has a few navigation labels and you don't know what to do with that, how you take that and creatively pitch it and add some depth to it can reveal a lot about how they think about these projects.
Yeah. Oh man, this is awesome. Like, we're turning into a little bit of a masterclass here. I'm loving it. So I see that, there's your agency name has a bit of a nod to mountaineering, I'm assuming.
Yeah, well, we've had quite the history ourselves. This is a company I joined that was already named Marketeering. I'll be honest with you. I think it used to have a connotation around like the Three Musketeers or something
Okay.
like that.
Okay. I can see
We've
that.
just kind of kept it over the years.
Okay.
And yeah, but we had when I joined, I was the first employee.
Okay.
There was a mom, sort of a husband and wife that were running the shop, and I started just as an internship because I was doing a few gigs in Seattle, and mobile SEO was just taking off, but I didn't know a lot of people that were doing it. And Danny, the founder of the company, he wanted to do local business marketing. And I was like, well, that seems like a good area where people are going to be interested in mobile SEO. So I'll give this a try and make a few extra bucks. The rest went from there. Like you said, with small agencies, if you're willing to take on responsibility and developing skills, that's usually the path to working your way up an agency.
Absolutely.
Until we get to the day we're here, where
Yeah.
you kind of
Yeah.
made it.
So what would you say are like, maybe like your big goals in the next 3 to 5 years as an agency?
Well, we're talking a lot about, augmentation, like automation through augmentation, where we need to embrace AI technology and find our footing there. And I hope to have achieved that in the next few years, which is a funny thing to say because it changes so quickly that who knows what it will be in the next few years. We're sort of in a survival mindset. It's a tough time out there for a lot of agencies. So
Mm-hmm.
we want to rebrand in the next couple of years. We have some ideas, so maybe I'll surprise you with a rebrand.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I want to deepen our bench for strategy because I think a lot of the relationships we're going to have with clients in the future are going to be less deliverable focused because those deliverables are going to be much more automated and more consultative and supportive. I think the direction SEO is going to take is more of a disambiguation, like go out and get this data point corrected, which is going to require going on to all these different sites and finding out where incorrect information is. And instead of reaching out to build some terrible exact match link to improve your SEO rankings, we're going to be doing outreach to try to get information corrected and more activities like that. So reworking our SOPs for that kind of environment, more of a near-term goal, I think, than the next few years, but we don't know yet how long that kind of transition is going to take.
Okay. Okay. Very interesting. Yeah, it is a wild time, and definitely it feels like there's been a slowdown in projects. I don't know if you've seen this as well, where clients are just taking longer to figure out what they want to do, and they're just unsure about what to do next.
Yeah, there definitely has been a slowdown. I would say it's a good thing that we have hosting and maintenance services because the original reason we even offered hosting and maintenance is because I thought it would be a great way to have a strong base of clients that are only paying you a few $100 a month to manage their websites, that if they needed a new website, if they needed work, now you have a pool of resources to work on, referrals or upsells. And that's been really important to keeping going and keeping things consistent. What's struggling right now for a lot of agencies is MRR. But there's still a lot of good projects out there, a lot of good project work that we can carry through on. The MRR will come back. I think everybody just figures some stuff out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's really smart. Yeah, getting that recurring revenue in there and the maintenance stuff is just really smart. As we kind of wrap things up here, because this has been a great conversation, but I like to try and keep them short for you.
Sure.
If you were starting an agency today, would you still go kind of with this full service, or would you niche down immediately?
Oh, I don't know if I'd start an agency today. It's tough, but if I were to do that, just start very small and stay very small. We've made a lot of mistakes over the year with following the wrong KPIs and wanting a huge team when we probably didn't need it or couldn't afford it in some cases. And I'd be much more resistant to increasing headcount quickly today than I was in the past. So I think that the whole start as a contractor, bring in support when you need it and really evaluate when is the right time to scale, is so important. So yeah, stay lean, stay flexible, don't lock yourself into any specific thing too early, and just find out where the new opportunities are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You brought up the keyword KPI there. What is one KPI that agency owners ignore, but they really should be obsessed with?
Yeah, it's not so much, we've struggled a lot with time tracking. Like we don't track time, we track commitments. And I think following along and instilling trust in your team, but at the same time, holding them accountable to a certain output is one of the most important KPIs. Because as people are struggling with a lot of new things coming at them, it's tempting to freeze and lack direction and maybe feel like the same things that you were doing in the past aren't working anymore. And there's that, man, I'm not getting the kind of output that I want with my input. And working really closely with your team to get them past those freeze points and monitoring very closely about how people are tracking against their commitments without resorting to things like making them track every minute of their time. That's probably the most important KPI for me, is making sure the team feels comfortable with their workload so they have that space to be creative.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. And I can relate to that because I definitely like to chase all the shiny objects and get lost. And then of course Reddit opens and now time just went away. So yeah, no, time management, definitely a key thing. Mike, this has been really great. I appreciate you putting up with all of my hard-hitting questions and everything.
No,
If people want to get in touch, if they want to hire you guys, what's the best way for them to reach out?
you can reach out directly to me. Just shoot me an email. It's mike@marketeeringgroup.com. We keep it pretty simple. And always happy to talk.
Fantastic. Besides the website, are you anywhere on the social medias? Can people follow you anywhere and keep up with you?
Yeah, I don't do a lot of the socials, but LinkedIn I'm on pretty often. So hit me up on LinkedIn. I'll be
Fantastic. Fantastic. Mike, this has been great. I look forward to having you on again at some point. Man, please have a great day.
there. All right. Thank you very much, Roger.